Greetings and salutations and welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment down below, and be sure to share this video with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is a playwright, actor, and script consultant based in Los Angeles, California. He's a longtime member of Moving Arts, an award-winning Los Angeles-based theater dedicated to the development and production of new plays. For 12 years, he served as the theater's literary director, moderating the company's Playwriting series and playing a vital role in the development of new plays. He also has served as a dramaturg for the company's signature new play development program, Mad Lab. He is also a literary consultant for playwriting and screenwriting contests and fellowships. He's on the board of the Alliance of Los Angeles Playwrights and produces the annual In Our Own Voices Playwriting series. His plays include Find Brother, A Lesson in Proper Bow Fluffing Technique, and The Meadows. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Trey Nichols.
Thank you.
Trey, thanks for coming on.
You're welcome. Thank you. What a fantastic introduction.
I appreciate it. Well, it's all based on fact, so no embellishment here. Pull that a little closer to you just in case, so everybody can hear you at home.
Yeah. Better?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. So you started off as an actor.
Yes.
And then went into playwriting, or was it vice versa?
Then went into playwriting. Started playwriting in college.
Okay.
I went to Northwestern, and there was a contest called the Agnes Nixon Playwriting Contest, named after Agnes Nixon, who was an alumnus, and the creator of All My Children and daytime television, celebrity star writer. And so at the time, I was working during the holidays as a security guard, late night security guard, and I had this idea for a play, which I called Security, and it won one of the awards in the short play division of the Agnes Nixon Festival for that year. So I got a production. This production was directed by John Cameron Mitchell. And one of the actors was Harry J. Lennox. So I was working in a really fantastic environment at that time. And that was a really great experience. And so I caught the playwriting bug in college and continued to write. Took a playwriting class that year, senior year, with Linda Walsh Jenkins, and continued writing after that. And it was at Northwestern that the seeds for my next play, Fathers at a Game, a longer one-act play, kind of came to fruition.
Nice.
So, yeah,
So had you had any proper training before security was done, or
not really? I mean, as an actor, you study plays and scripts, and you're working on scenes and you're in productions. But I hadn't really. So a lot of it was instinctive, and so it started with this idea that there was kind of a newbie security guard. And a grizzled veteran security guard, and the newbie's first night is this one night, and that's the basis of the play. The older guy's trying to figure out what this new guy's doing there, and is he there as a partner? Is he there to replace him? We're not quite sure until we get to the end of the play, and it's quite explosive. So, and there's a lot of kind of theatrical game playing and brinksmanship throughout the play, but it was sort of, I would say, somewhat inspired by the three playwrights I was interested in at the time: David Mamet, Sam Shepard, Harold Pinter. And I got to work on scenes by those playwrights in many of the acting classes that I was taking at the time.
What did you take away from each of those playwrights to apply? I mean, were you really knowledgeable? Did you really take elements that you had picked up from reading them and apply them in some way? And what were those?
Yes, I would say primarily Harold Pinter, this idea of kind of a comedy of menace that you see in The Dumbwaiter, The Homecoming, these wonderful pauses and silences, and a sense of kind of this violence underneath the language that emerges at certain key points. And so that helped me, I think, in how I wanted to frame this particular story about these two security guards.
Violence underneath the writing.
Yeah,
to explain unpack that for me. Tell me how does one do that, and what does that entail?
I feel like with The Homecoming, you have Teddy bringing home his new wife in this family of men that have been raised by a father, and so there's this just sense of menace and creepiness as they have to kind of deal with her in their almost toxically masculine environment. I don't think that Pinner would have used that word or expression, but and how she is able to kind of upend things in that environment. I mean, that's the best way I think I can put that. That you just get this sense that something dangerous is happening, and that forms the tension, and that's what I really tried to infuse in that first play of mine.
So how do you achieve that, though? I mean, how do you apply it to playwriting? And I know, as always, and you may not have listened to enough episodes, that there's always a question that I throw out that always puts a playwright on the spot, because you're not in front of your computer right now. You're not writing, so I'm not sure if you're not in the throes of it, if you can really answer that question. I'm curious if there's an example off the top of your head that you can.
Of violence underneath the language.
Of how to do that while in writing.
How to do that,
like when on the page.
Okay. Well. Okay. So in that play, there was the characters,
or even on your own, even in your own play. Okay.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, in Insecurity, for example, and this goes back so many years now, but
sure.
But this is where it was really fresh and kind of hot for me, and I try to apply this kind of thing. The older security guard is trying to make an example, telling a story that ends with, so if you have an intruder comes in and he's got a gun, and what are you gonna do if he says, fuck you, buddy, lick my shoe, and he puts his shoe up on the desk and then kind of leaves it there with his gun pointing at the young guy. And so there's this moment of what? Okay, you just told me a story to make an example or to create kind of an idea about some advice, but your shoe is there, kind of toward my mouth, and your gun is pointed at me. So I guess I'm going to complete this idea by licking your shoe, and so we can get out of this moment. And that's what happens. And so it's all kind of this story build up to that, and then the young guy is able to kind of take this sense of kind of brutality kind of underneath what what the older security guard is doing and saying, and sort of turn it around, but in more of a kind of an intellectual way. Because the young kid, the idea was the play was about generational conflict in a way. The young kid is knows all these like telephone systems and cameras and how a lot of technology operates. The old guy is security guard who walks around with a gun, and is ready to shoot. And so that formed out of the basis of their how their worlds collide, and how the young man eventually replaces the old guy. Training
day for the stage.
Yeah, right. In a 45-minute play. Yeah.
Nice. So after you went through that and you decided to take a class, what were some of the things that you learned through proper, for lack of a better phrase, proper training?
That's hard to say going back, because I learned a lot through. I mean, it was great studying playwriting with Linda Walsh Jenkins. She was the professor of playwriting at Northwestern when I was there. And then when I graduated, I went to Victory Gardens and joined I was an intern for their literary committee. And then later, a few years later, moving to the Bay Area, did the same at Eureka Theater. So a lot of my education was reading, books about playwriting and screenwriting and, storytelling, and then reading plays and having to kind of evaluate them. And so I think you kind of work your way in to understanding story almost intuitively. Like, am I enjoying this? Am I not enjoying this? What's exciting me about this? Oh my God, that's really cool. Oh, what's this character doing? What does this character want? What is the central conflict here? And so you're kind of engaging in sort of a dialogue with the script and the play. But certain ideas that I've come to appreciate, later on, are things like the ticking clock. I mean, maybe this seems obvious to a lot of your viewers and listeners, and playwrights, but the idea that there's a task that has to be accomplished in a certain amount of time, that has to happen, and there have to be high stakes. It has to be almost life or death, or something along those lines. Something that makes it important, urgent. Characters that talk about the past, often in plays where with newer or younger playwrights or less experienced players, I would
sure.
say. Okay. A conversation about the past often seems to be designed to fill in exposition, whereas I think more effectively a conversation about the past is to assert maybe an objective that reveals itself, through the scene. Maybe if we're brothers and I'm telling you a story about the time that I saved your ass, maybe what I really need is you to save my ass and something's happening now. And so I'm using that to kind of guilt you. And so now we have an objective. Now we have a purpose to that rather than just remember when we used to, or remember the time that, and that could be death for a play, I think. If it's almost like the play stops, the action stops. And so what I'm really focused on when I read plays are, and write plays are, what is the want? What is the need? Because those aren't necessarily the same thing, and how the need is something that happens, I think, through the course of a play thematically. A want may be something that it can also run the course of a play, but is also immediate, beat by beat, scene by scene. And there was something else I was going to say about that, but it's slipped.
It's okay. It'll come back. It always does. So would you say that when you're using the time element, like something has to happen sorry, you called it a specific something.
I know what I wanted to say, actually, by the way.
Go for it.
Okay. Something has to happen in a certain amount of time. And in any conversation, dialogue, there's some kind of urgency, a want. But I also believe in the idea, and I don't know if I've heard this or have coined it, but breathing space, breathing room for a play, especially in the opening pages where you're just getting to know the characters and their world and who they are and what they want. And so often and this has also to do with point of attack, where you're starting the play and what the backstory is and how you inform your audience about what's happened before that allows something to happen, an immediacy that needs to take place. One example I think I can use is The Humans, which was I saw that at the Amundsen a couple years ago. And this is an example I bring up in the stage play. It's a Thanksgiving gathering, and all the characters are gathering, and it seems to have a lot of breathing room. It seems like I'm not quite sure what's happening. We're getting to know the characters a little bit, but what is going on here? Is there something that's going to emerge? And eventually, when the kids are gone, I think it's the mom that says to the dad, "Have you told them yet?" And then we're off to the races. Then now there's some urgent thing that is going to be expressed. There's a secret or something that is going to be revealed. And so that's when, for me at least, that's when the play started. Now for others, they may have gotten caught up with the characters right away. But that's where I felt, now I have something kind of to hang my attention on. The way I pay attention to a play is now there's something that's going to happen. We've been set up in a way for something. And then there's that wonderful character. Did you see this play?
I did not know.
There's a neighbor who, I can't really explain it because she's kind of a mystery figure who, there are these loud noises and she kind of appears almost as a spectral figure in, I want to say in like the basement or the washing machine room or something. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. But that's my recollection, that there's this mystery character. I need to read that play again.
Did you read it?
I have a huge play library and I'm always, revisiting my favorites.
So you read it and watched it?
Mm-hmm. I've not read it yet. I bought it shortly after seeing the play, but I've not read the play yet.
I'm just curious. There are things that you picked up or noticed on that reading go round than opposed to the other. Are there, when you use the urgency aspect in your writing, are there other tropes that you use? Are there other elements or styles?
Oh yeah.
Do you have a particular style?
That's a good question. I tend to think of my work as falling into the dark comedy sort of subgenre. I'm not sure if that's always true. I like comedy. I like compassion. I like surprising acts of kindness in characters, maybe characters that don't necessarily, I'm sort of borrowing this from, it's a Blake Snyderism.
Yes, okay.
Characters that act kindly toward another character that doesn't necessarily deserve that kindness. But something in the bestower of the kindness, something rises up in them. And so I love characters that, wounded villains, wounded antagonists, so that we don't get, and redemption. I think is important for me. There are many plays and of course film and TV where the villain has to stay really nasty and really evil, and we like that. But I think that today we've kind of redefined the idea of the villain as somebody who has a deeper backstory and somebody who in ways you can empathize with.
Sure.
And understand. So again, the idea of the wounded villain, I think, is compelling to me.
Okay. Is that kind of the same as would you call that similar to the anti-hero?
No. I would say the anti-hero is a protagonist who's also wounded and does bad things to achieve a good. Okay, so just to borrow from TV, Vic Mackey in The Shield and Walter White in Breaking Bad, I think, are two anti-heroes. And I love how Walter White's whole development. You start in that. If we can talk a little about TV for a moment.
Sure, absolutely, go for
how
it.
He has.
I'm going to bring that real quick. Just go ahead and bring that right.
Oh, sure.
Or just you can actually bring it even closer. You can bring it across.
Okay.
It'll come. You can lean back and it'll come with you. You can.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So he has a disabled son, a pregnant wife. He is slumming as a high school chemistry teacher. We learned later that he lost his company or sold it to his partner and really sold it for didn't get a lot out of it and money wise, and he's struggling, and he has a second job at a car wash, but he has these great skills in chemistry, and he teams up with, because he's in that high school milieu, Jesse, and they form that partnership, and then we see how. It's not just initially. It's about money and security. Oh, because he has cancer as well. So ticking clock. We think he's going to die, and then when that doesn't happen, he gets caught up in these this whole drug business, and he's good at it. And we see him in these perilous situations, but he always seems to find his way out. And man, how his character grows and changes throughout that. But it's also very, I think, consistent in what he he's wounded. And how this really builds him up to, I think, as he says himself to Skyler in the last episode, that he did it because he wanted to be someone. That was what really motivated him. Because there's a point at which he's made enough money, whether he survives or succumbs to the cancer, she's taken care of with the baby and with the son. But he keeps going.
So I don't know how many seasons it lasted, but when you've got however many 150 episodes, let's say, you've got a lot of time to unpack and really delve into that. How do you do that as a playwright with a certain...
Man, you have to be economical. And I think economy in playwriting is really important. So you may not, and we want change in drama. We don't want so much change week by week in TV drama, of course, because we love those characters for what they are and their flaws and their strengths and other attributes. But I think we want change in a play. But I think it's interesting, how we look at change. I don't think it's good to have too strong a change. I think when a character achieves an objective or doesn't achieve the objective, maybe circumstances change, but I wonder how often believable it is to have like the soul of a character change throughout the course of a play. But it depends. You have plays that are like a one act or a full length without intermission, maybe 70 or 80 minute play. I mean, that's a fairly popular and well known format now, to have just it's a full length play, but it's performed in a single action without intermission. So maybe not a lot of change happens to those characters there, but certainly there are circumstances or a situation where, certain actions are required, by the character, certain conflicts, emerge. So we do end in a different place, but I'm not sure to what extent, we want change, but I don't know if how deeply a character changes by the end of that.
Well, do you think that Nora makes that a soul change? She has a change in her soul by the end of A Doll's House in Ibsen, or
I think she does.
Okay,
I think
Or do you think she's always been that way through the whole play?
I have to revisit that. I think to really make that determination. Right.
I think in shorter plays, obviously, it's probably a little bit harder, but I think
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of like True West, the brothers. How they kind of become each other in a way.
Right.
That's such an interesting play. I guess like The Cherry Orchard, I mean, Lopakin, Varia, I mean, those, I'm not sure there's certainly there's longing. I'm fairly well versed in my Chekhov, so I'm thinking of the Seagull as well, and Treplev and Nina, and certainly there are changes among those characters. But I think it depends also on the time frame that you're working with, act by act, and the what the characters are facing, and
the audience is your customer, so
that's right. What those characters are facing and what they are up against. And, you could have a play that starts, in 1 year, and Act 2 is maybe 3 or 4 years later, or again, it's, the continuous action. But I think that's also up to the story that you're telling.
Sure.
I don't know, the playwright really needs to make that kind of determination.
What were some of your biggest struggles when you started out, if you can remember?
Do you mean in terms of writing or telling a story, or
both?
Theater?
Both, absolutely.
Gosh, I think wanting to make, like in the writing process, my first full length play was The Meadows. And so I'm not sure. And so it's about two friends, two young guys. For their 21st birthday, one is kidnapped the other, and they go to Las Vegas. And so I had a very clear idea of how I wanted Act 1 to be the first 6 days of their week in Vegas. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
First 6 days of their week in Vegas. And Act 2 is 3 separate scenes of their 7th day, when all this shit kind of, happens. And so reading it, and this is some of the feedback I got as well, it was described by my director, Lee Walkner, as picaresque. And I feel that's a fair assessment, but that's episodic.
Thank you.
And I felt that was true. And reading it, and I wrote this over a long period of time. So the other thing is some of the writing in the scenes was uneven. I think my more recent writing was stronger because I was just a more knowledgeable and smarter playwright and storyteller. And some of the scenes that I'd written like maybe a couple years before and hadn't quite worked out, some of the kinks or bugs were not quite as strong. But so getting back to what I struggle with, and I think about this a lot in plays I write now, and most of my plays are shorter pieces, is writing in ways that escalate the tension and the conflict and add complications. That's what I'm always encouraging playwrights in my playwriting workshop to be aware of. What new elements are you adding that adds a new complication, so that it doesn't seem like, and this is, again, the thing I think I struggle with, that even though circumstances change scene by scene in Act 1, which was, as I mentioned, each scene was 1 day. It was something that happened on 1 day of their trip. The general stakes and rhythm sometimes felt the same. That we're watching them, now they're in the casino, now they're at Hoover Dam, now they're doing something else, and so going back, I revised it in a way that I hope made the scenes escalate, at least, if not in a clear and obvious way, at least in a subtle way, in how this friendship is kind of falling apart. And I guess I can tell you, I'm going to share something else with you, that a lot of my, 3 of my early plays, so The Meadows, Security, and Fathers of the Game. That was a longer one-act piece that I wrote that was produced at Moving Arts, that received its premiere production at Moving Arts in 95. All my early plays seem to involve 2 central male figures, and one in a friendship or relationship of some kind, and one was stronger than the other. And that is sort of my history as a guy seeking or getting involved in friendships in which I often am drawn to a stronger male type figure. A friend who is super smart, opinionated, maybe sometimes a little obnoxiously so, but someone who I kind of look up to in a way. And I take kind of a more submissive role in that friendship. And so I think what I give to that person is an open audience, and certainly there's back and forth dialogue, but I come at maybe from a different perspective. So in most of my male friendships, each of us kind of fill something that the other might lack. I think that's fair to say that. And so in my plays, my early plays, I was kind of trying to work out this dynamic in a way. And I think that's most obvious in The Meadows. That received a production at Moving Arts in 2000. And that was my first full-length full length production of a full length play. And so the difficulty in that was that I feel that maybe I was trying to work out that dynamic scene by scene in ways that if you're an audience member sitting back, it just seems like kind of a flatness, like this playwright's just kind of maybe dithering a little bit. I don't know if that's true. And I had such a wonderful production team with that. Julie Briggs was the director. Lee Walkner produced that play. We had wonderful actors, and in fact, the actors that played one of the lead roles his name is David Hoffman. He's the guy on the Liberty,
Oh, yes.
with the ostrich.
Yes.
So it's a thrill to see him. I think of the Meadows every time I see that guy. Anyway, in fact, I want to make sure. Yeah, Julie Briggs directed the Meadows. I'm sorry if I may have misspoken earlier.
I think
okay,
that's
all right, okay. Yeah. Lee produced it. All right. So
I think you did. Okay. I think you had mentioned it.
Lee. I apologize.
Nope.
Yeah, but they were both very involved in that.
Sure.
I mean, with the dramaturgy and they worked in very close partnership at Moving Arts for many years, and so it was. I almost felt like it was a collaborative effort. So that's something I struggle with, I guess. Getting back to your main question, that. How you advance a story in terms of adding those complications story-wise, introducing new circumstances, new elements that really build the story toward its inevitable conclusion.
Do you find that there's a danger in, because I think we all do it as playwrights, we all have a tendency to put it away for a while. Do you think that there's a danger in putting something away and coming to revisit it later on down the road, especially since you mentioned that your writing was inconsistent with that particular play? Do you think putting it away for a while and revisiting it kind of...
Possibly, but I can't really commit to a yes or a no to that, because I have a play that was developed Moving Arts has a program called Mad Lab. I was one of the first Mad Lab fellows in the 2014 session, and I had to put that play away. It got some terrific feedback and some not so great feedback. And I felt that I made some mistakes with that play. But I'm still not quite sure what those mistakes were entirely. I have a sense. But I also want it to be authentic, in terms of my voice and what I want to accomplished with that play, and it had some really tough stuff that happened in the play in terms of sex and violence on stage that I felt was warranted and needed. I also, some of the feedback I got was that all the characters were just so awful and nasty, and my feeling writing them was I love them and they're wounded, and maybe have experienced trauma, and how does that come across, that they're doing bad things for reasons they believe are good? And some people they didn't see that at all. They just thought these characters were nasty. So I thought long and hard about that. And the other thing is that play, written in 2014, was very specific to a period in time at the end of the 2014. So Obama was president. We're nearing the end of his second term, and it was about it centers around a private contractor who's gone missing in Afghanistan, and it's his brother at home is trying to find him and hires a self-serving videographer to create sort of a project, like an internet project, to bring attention to his missing brother's plight. And so things kind of go sour from there. And so now I think it might be better for the Trump or post-Trump era. But I would have to make some major revisions. Sure.
Were there any other things that you said you're not quite sure what they were? We'll call them mistakes. I'm not a fan of that, because I'm not quite sure that you make mistakes in writing. I think it's a learning experience no matter what. So are there any other things that you think might have been issues for you in that regard for that particular piece?
Okay. Yes. This gets a little complicated.
Sure.
And I say it with an open heart. There was a character, and I'm not sure it's my story to tell this character's story. And I'll put it maybe in more general terms. Say you have a character in a story whose community has had a traumatic event in its early history. Not early, maybe about 100 years ago. let's
Sure.
say. And so a lot of the community defines itself by that awful atrocity, that event. And say you have somebody in that ethnic community who acknowledges that, is aware of that, but kind of doesn't feel as close to that as maybe his or her relatives or peers or colleagues within that community, and kind of wants to break free from that. Because it feels that it may be holding him or her back from assimilating in mainstream American culture. If I let this horrific thing from history define me, then then that's who I am, and I need to move beyond that. And so I'm not sure if I'm really framing this right.
No, I think you are, and I think there's some nuance to this, and so I completely understand where you're coming from. And again, it is about playwriting, but and of course we always like to try to avoid politics in whatever aspect. But I still think that I'm not quite sure that. I think we've avoided. I think that it's a story. Maybe it's a story that needs to be told, and I don't think that certain things belong to necessarily anybody. That's just me. That's my. You're avoiding that story then.
Well, I tell the writers in my workshop, just tell your story. Tell the story you're passionate
100%.
about telling. But I was just reading a little bit about. Do you know the novel American Dirt?
No, I'm not.
By I think the writer's name. I want to say Janine Cummins.
Okay.
A white writer telling a story about Mexican immigrants, and so. This received all sorts of accolades before it was published, but then some of the reviews came out criticizing her for telling a story that was not really hers to tell. And I think that's an important idea. What stories are ours to tell? But again, we don't want to limit ourselves. So I think that it's just you have to use your judgment, I think, in the stories you want to tell. And so let me tell you, if I can go on,
Sure. I
had people come to this reading of this play that I'm referring to. With this character that wanted to kind of unshackle himself from history, from historical trauma of his community.
Sure.
And these people in the audience were so hurt by that. I'll never forget that. And they also thought the characters made kind of a cliche of that ethnic group. And, greasy, dishonest, little slimy, shady, sketchy. And I didn't mean to really convey that, but again, my intention was to create a compelling dilemma for this character and the other characters, and to show them doing the things they were doing out of their wounds and trying to do something that they felt was good, despite the fact that we looking at them, you're like, they're awful. Oh my God, what a terrible thing this person's doing. They think that it's serving a larger purpose, So that's why there's torture in the
Sure.
play and weird sex and betrayals and all sorts of nasty stuff. And again, this is the play Find Brother, and I think I need to take another look at that because I feel like I spent so much time thinking about this play and researching this play, and and I feel like it needs a second chance. I did send it to a few places, and it really didn't get much traction, but I didn't get the kind of feedback that I felt would really help me take it to the next level. It was most, you get polite rejection letters.
Sure.
From, development, entities and organizations and theaters.
Is it, and not to put you on the spot in this, is it
Please do.
a fear, is it that you don't think it's your story to tell, or is it that you're more of afraid of the backlash that might come along with it?
I would say it's a little bit of both. I would say that I would think that the backlash. It depends on if I feel the backlash is deserved, but a backlash is a backlash nonetheless, and so that's why. But then I'm also wondering what would happen if I just took any references to any specific, ethnic identity out of the play. Would that weaken the play, or would it make it more universal?
Perhaps.
I don't know. I mean, one example is, like if you know this character's last name, you know what his ethnic background is.
Sure.
If I took out his last name, but the idea in the play was it was supposed to be somewhat comedic that the guy that hires him, the guy that hires a videographer, can't pronounce his name.
And that's been a problem. It's like, he wants to get ahead. So the videographer's whole deal is he's doing like weddings and birthday parties, and he wants to be a filmmaker. He wants to be the next Spielberg or James Cameron or whoever. And he, no one can pronounce his name, and he wants to shorten it. And his family is all up in arms about that. So he feels really trapped. That he wants to kind of break out of his family background, and he wants to he doesn't want to have an accent even. He just wants to just go be part of the the mainstream American world. And I feel like part of his other issue is maybe he doesn't feel there's room for him in that world. And so again, this idea that I could be getting these circumstances all wrong in terms of the verisimilitude of how Hollywood works, but I found it an interesting dilemma if I devised it just for this character and his circumstances, feeling he's not getting ahead, feeling frustrated, and then this opportunity falls in his lap with this guy who's missing his brother in Afghanistan, and he can turn this into something sensational, kind of taking advantage of the situation that will really put him on the map. And that's what he wants, to be on the map, to be somebody. And then maybe he can tell his people's story at a certain later time when he's huge, when he is Steven Spielberg, or whomever, just pick a director. So it's one of those things where I take feedback to heart, and I've really thought a lot about this play and how to do it and the characters and the world of that play justice.
Sure.
And I think maybe also, the guy who's missing his brother would now be kind of a MAGA guy. And I'm interested in plays. So I talked about compassion earlier. I would love to see a play where someone like that is not made fun of or ridiculed in a way in the writing, but taken seriously, and where you can find the heart of a character that has, it's all in for Trump. And who is that person? Because I feel like, we're so divided right now as a culture, and I wonder if there's any remedy for that.
You think in theater, you'd think in theater there would be. I mean, that's why we do it. But that's hopefully in due time we can get to that. We can get to that place. You mentioned earlier about encouraging your newer playwrights to introduce elements to promote change. How do you do that? How do you achieve that?
Oh gosh, that's tricky.
Or what do you find in your with newer playwrights, beginning playwrights, amateur playwrights, whatever aspect you want to call that, that the most common, again, I don't want to say mistakes, but errors, habits.
Okay. If I have this play that seems like it's just an argument that's just flatlined, it's just a couple or siblings or whomever, they're just arguing back and forth. I caution them against that. I guess, because like we're reading 10 pages. We read about 10 pages per week aloud. Also, these workshops are on Zoom, and I've invited actors to join us as well. Like usually we have 3 or 4 in the house on the Zoom. So that helps the writers really hear the work, I think, in a more unique way than when it's just the other playwrights, reading the work aloud. But if, usually you kind of take the temperature of the room or the Zoom, as it were, and we'll look at what happens in the scene. You've established, A, and now we've moved on to B, and now we're in C, but nothing's really changed. These characters are kind of flatlining throughout the scene in terms of an argument. So maybe there's usually clues that the playwright has planted that we can harvest and exploit, and those are the seeds that will grow, I think. But often it's like a circumstantial change.
You need to just be aware of introducing new elements, and so elements. Maybe some aspect in the background, or some of one of the characters, or a new want, or a hidden agenda, so that we think we're in a flatlining scene, but there's something that a character is not articulated yet that then comes out later. So that's I think that's the best way I can put it.
Well, I know. Again, this is.
I'm sorry. Also has to do with the design of the play. I think if you're just writing because you're inspired by maybe a simple premise,
and want to just kind of explore an argument, that may be okay for a first draft. But I think you have to look at the overall design of the play and really pick those things that are going to emerge later. And then when you go back and revise, you're planning those things that will later emerge.
Well, I know it's also going to be per piece as well, to figure out exactly what those elements might be or what's lacking.
Yeah.
So since we're kind of in that realm right now, let's talk about the Mad Lab. How does that go about? How does it? What's the process? How do they sign up? They submit a piece, and then how does that?
Those pieces are selected by a selection committee. So there are, I think, 3 individuals at Moving Arts that are on that committee. There may be other readers as well for Mad Lab. I know that we have, because we accept submissions just over the transom through the website, and so there's a literary committee for that. So for Mad Lab, when I did it, you submit a play online and you're accepted or you're not. Once you're accepted, it starts early in the year, and so you have Zoom readings of each draft and then a discussion to follow. Those are moderated by one of the dramaturgs or producers of Mad Lab, and then the playwright will do further work. And I believe that what you submit to Mad Lab is not a play, not a first draft, but an idea for a play that you want to develop in Mad Lab over the course of like 9 months. So it's a long process, and so I'm not quite sure. They tweak it. They have for the last few years tweaked the whole process. Like for 1 year, I was a Mad Lab fellow. I had a dramaturg, and then I think the second or third year, I was a dramaturg for one of the new younger playwrights. And so we would have meetings, and I would give her feedback, and so that would develop. Then we would have readings where there would be other people that were invited, the other writers and the other Mad Lab dramaturgs. And so I think the process is the same. Since the pandemic, it's been on Zoom, and I'm not sure how many folks are invited to those early readings. But eventually it leads to a full, wonderful public staged reading of each piece, and those were fantastic. I saw one of them this past year, and then one the year before. Now we have our new space at Atwater Village. Before it was at the the former evidence room, but I can't think of the name, on Beverly. Well, anyway, it's a wonderful space.
Sounds like the basement of a police department.
That's kind of yeah. The Evidence Room was a wonderful theater company that was around for a number of years, and that space, I believe, is still a live venue with 2 performing areas and a bar. It's great, and I'm gonna kill myself for not thinking of the name of the space. Anyway, it's kind of in the Silver Lake area. So these readings are really fantastic, and the ones last year were even more fully realized in terms of the staging. The ones that a couple of years ago and before were mostly like actors seated with music stands, but now they've really it's just really great, and they were very full houses and really enthusiastic audiences, and a little a form you fill out afterwards to offer any feedback or commentary you might have. Very specific questions are there, so It's not like a free-for-all, which that's something I think is important. Like in my workshop, I really try to tailor and moderate the discussions, the feedback sessions to the nuances of each play, and it's all designed really to protect the playwright. But there's an opportunity at the end of each little discussion for the playwright to ask questions, of the other people in the group, and I'm always kind of aware of not ever wanting to put a playwright on the spot in that kind of situation in a feedback session, but just to hear the audience's perception. And so there are very tailored questions about in terms of moderating a feedback session after a play reading.
What are the criteria to getting in to the Mad Lab? If you're basing it just on an idea, is it we like this idea, we think there's promise in that? I mean, how detailed do they have to go in what they want in order to hopefully get selected for?
Yeah, I'm not really part of that process. So I would say that any playwright listening to this who's interested in getting involved in Mad Lab or Moving Arts should go to movingarts.org. I'm not sure what the deadline is for Mad Lab, but it's usually December or January. So
there may still be time to submit if playwrights want to go to movingarts.org, and then Mad Lab should be right there. Not to be confused with Mad Lab of Columbus, Ohio, which is another theater company.
So now that you guys have also, since lockdown, and you guys have moved it over to Zoom, does that mean that they've branched it out? Maybe, I don't know if you do know this, have they branched it out to playwrights across the country now rather than just somebody who might be LA based? Because if it was live originally, I would assume that they're just LA based or local playwrights, where now if it's Zoom, they might be able to.
Okay, I'm sorry, I may have misspoken. So before pandemic, it was Zoom. It was not Zoom, it was live at that venue in Silver Lake. This last one in 2022 was live at the Atwater Playhouse, where Moving Arts is currently, that's their new space, or their space as of early 2021, the Atwater Playhouse. Not to be confused with the Atwater Theater Center, which is a complex of 3 theaters. Atwater Playhouse is a little ways up Casitas Street.
Got it. So, but is the whole process of Mad Labs, is that live in person, or is that still via?
Yeah, now it's live.
Okay.
Now it's live.
All right. So they really have to be local to participate in this.
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to
and
make
I
sure.
believe I'm not sure it's specific to LA stories. Like that, I don't think the plays have to be set in Los Angeles, but I'm not exactly sure about that.
Sure.
I haven't actually read the guidelines, so they may have been revised since I last went to the website. And I'm sorry, I'm not involved in that process right now. So
not at all. Not at all.
Better information for you and your listeners.
We'll go to what you are involved with, and that's your workshops. So
Yes.
how do your workshops work? No pun intended.
Well, we used to. Okay, so it used to be at Moving Arts in Silver Lake for a number of years, and then I decided to move them in my West LA home because most of the playwrights who enrolled, just by happenstance, were in the West LA area, and that's where I lived at the time. And so for a few years, we had them in my little apartment there. And so, because I limited it's 6 writers maximum, plus me, and so we just put some, chairs around, and we'd have some, scones and coffee, and, people would bring their pages in. It was great. And then we would do the readings at Moving Arts Theater. Our former space was on Hyperion Avenue in Silver Lake. It was a little police substation converted into a tiny proscenium theater. It was wonderful. And then we were at LATC for a while. So the readings for my workshop have moved to different venues. Okay, so I get married in 2016, move into my wife's place. Now I don't really have a place to house the workshop. One of the playwrights offered her photographic studio / apartment, so we were there for a little while. And then I saw an email on Big Cheap List. You know what Big Cheap is?
No, I'm not.
Big Cheap Theater is a listserv that's been around for a number of years now, and that's kind of a local online listserv resource for theaters, playwrights, actors, directors. And I would encourage any of your listeners to go to just Google Big Cheap Theater, and you'll be able to sign up for those emails.
Good to know.
If you're interested in that. So anyway, City Garage Theater at Bergamot Station. In Santa Monica, a theater I was familiar with. They do a lot of avant-garde work and a lot of European and American plays, but mostly it's leaning toward the avant-garde. Was looking for an acting teacher to kind of expand their mission and some of their activities. So I reached out to them by email, Frederic Michel and Charles Duncombe, the co-owners and producers there, and an artistic director, Frederic, and I suggested, I said, I don't teach acting, but I have a playwriting workshop. Would you consider a residency? And they were really open to that. So for 2019, I was in residence there. And so the playwrights would meet there. We would have the readings there with their wonderful, talented ensemble, reading the roles at those readings. The readings are unrehearsed, by the way. And so that was fantastic. And then COVID hit. And so since then, I've been on Zoom. And so eventually we're going to do something again, but Zoom has been going really well for me. But I still want to be have the workshop in some way, have a residency at City Garage or be involved in City Garage. It's such a great space, and I live close by, and I just I really miss being there, and I still I'm a subscriber. I'm a fan of their work as well. So.
Now, since it's your workshop, have you branched out as well? Have you taken playwrights that aren't local? And
yes, that's what's one thing that's been really great about that. I've had playwrights in Seattle, Portland, Oregon, one in St. Louis, Missouri, And I'm not always sure how they find the workshop.
That was one of my next question.
I guess I'm on Google. I'll come up in a search if you Google Playwriting Workshops Los Angeles. But I'm not sure how some of the out-of-town folks have found me. But I'm always interested in getting the information. And some were referred by others. Like maybe some lived in L.A. then moved, but they had friends in L.A. who knew of the workshop. Some from out of town were formerly in LA and then left, but now that it's on Zoom, they've reached out and they've enrolled, and so it's been great, kind of reconnecting with some of the playwrights that have been in the workshop over the years.
Now, do you have criteria that, based on when you will select a piece for your workshops, or is it just first come first serve?
A little bit of both. I ask that people send me a sample of their writing. It does not have to be a play. It can be a screenplay. It can be a TV spec script or episode they've written. It can be poetry. It could be an essay. I just want, now they want to write a play. I just want to get a sense of their ability and facility with language and storytelling. And then we have a phone call. And so I'll ask them what they want to do, what their ideas are. And so often they'll want to join up right away. Occasionally they'll say, wow, Trey, now that I talked to you and hear about what it entails, I don't think I'm ready for this. Oh. So that's fine too. I wish them the best because they maybe need to take a class. Well, that's the other thing I guess I'll say. This is not so a class in like how to write a play. It's for playwrights that are writing a play in progress. But that could be a first-time playwright too. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody with loads of playwriting or production experience. I've had a number of first-time playwrights in the workshop, or people that have transitioned from TV and film and want to write a play, have an idea for a play. But once we get into like that first session, there have been some situations where playwrights will withdraw. Once they see the level of the work and quality of the work the other writers submitting, they feel maybe a little unready or a little unsure. Or, I also, for the first session, if somebody's not ready with new pages, I will let them kind of spitball a project with me and the other writers so that maybe we can motivate them. Or if they have like questions about, a project they want to develop or a play they want to develop, but they're not quite sure what direction to go, and we'll have that conversation too. But I just allow that for the first session.
What's usually the reasons that, I didn't realize what this entails, I'm not quite ready for it? What are the reasons behind that they
often they seem personal, so I don't pry, but usually it's I have too much stuff going on right now, or I'm not really ready to write a play. I thought I was, but I don't think I can really do this. I don't think I can keep up with the weekly deadlines. That's another thing I'll mention in this workshop. Every playwright, so it's limited to 6 or 7 writers. I top out at 7, but usually, often there'll be an absence. So usually we have 5 or 6 in the group each week, and everyone is expected to submit up to 10 pages per week. And so you have a weekly deadline, and those are submitted. It's really great now. There's a thread, so everyone submits their PDF. Everyone gets the PDFs. And we just pop open our, the PDF on your computer and then the Zoom screen, and we're kind of going back and forth between the script and the Zoom. And it's been really fantastic. Sometimes there are writers that just, they start the first class and they just feel like overwhelmed, I think, and just unsure, or maybe not ready to write the play they thought. Maybe they had a great idea, a premise, but maybe they thought and I think the workshop description is clear on my website, but there are writers who maybe thought it was going to be more about how to write a play, and so taking these kind of little steps rather than seeing playwrights sending in, like 10 pages of a play in progress, which can be, I guess, can be a little intimidating to a new writer. And then there's some people that have to withdraw just for legitimate, conflicts that have occurred later or didn't come up. I'm always surprised by the writers that seem like they're going to join and then they say, oh, that's right. No, I have another class during that time period. It's like, you didn't know this? During the whole thing where I read your play and then we went through this interview. I don't read the whole play, but I'll read pages,
Sure.
And that they'll send to me just because I want to know who's interested in the workshop and a little bit about them, and then the interview is just kind of to find out more, but that's always interesting.
What are the criteria that you set forth when you're making the decision? Is it something is it this person could benefit from this because they have a lot to learn still, or is it they are a little bit more established, so it's going to be easier to work with them?
That's also, I think, a little bit of both. If it's somebody who's a pretty new playwright, or hasn't written a play before, but I see something in their voice, and after a conversation, I tell them, I can send you one of my short plays, which has like the final draft format that is the standard for playwriting manuscripts, or I'll send them one of my plays that they can copy that format. Maybe it's like I've written it in Microsoft Word or Pages or something,
sure,
just so they understand how the format works on the page if they haven't written a play before. But in their writing sample, if I see a spark of something that interests me and excites me, I will give them a slot, and I tend to do that on a first come first served basis. There are very few playwrights I've turned away because they just didn't seem ready. I shouldn't even say playwrights. People interested in participating in the workshop because they were too green. I've never seen a writing sample that felt like, something I couldn't really work with. I feel like if you have a basic understanding of character and story and dialogue, then there's a place for you in the workshop, and we'll work with you. Or I'll work with you. And, I facilitate the discussions usually with questions, and then I expect the writers and the actors to participate in that discussion. And it's always gentle. I try to be gentle. Sometimes I get really excited and passionate, but hopefully in a very positive and upbeat way. We're trying to support the playwright, support the story, support what they're doing, because I want everybody to leave the workshop at the end of the session to feel really jazzed and excited about working on their play. And I also like to know what we got, what we didn't get, and so it's, I don't like to make it prescriptive at all. I want the playwright to discover from the discussion, and so the playwright does not participate in the discussion initially. It's just us talking about the play. What's going on here? What's this about? What does it seem to be about? What does this character want? What, how is he or she achieving, what he or she wants, and where's this going? Where do we think this is going? What excites us about this? What pops for us? And where might we have dropped out or felt a little confused or not clear? And then at the end of everyone gets like 22 minutes. After the end of 20 minutes, the playwright can then jump in and say, "Did you guys understand this? Or did you, maybe ask a question or participate in a way, again, a gentle way, so that nobody is, not attacking, but challenging the playwright in ways that would make the playwright feel uncomfortable or that they have to answer for themselves. I don't want to ever put a playwright on the spot or make them feel they have to defend the work. I feel like the work should speak for itself, but if it's not quite speaking for itself, then maybe that's something the playwright wants to pay attention to in the revision process. And so then the next week, you're expected to bring in subsequent pages so that everybody's writing consecutively, but there are times when, very rarely, but playwright will want to bring in a scene from later in the play, because I just need to get this climax scene out of my head. And I caution against that because we can't really discuss it until we kind of know what's happened beforehand. But so I'm generally reticent about that. And then sometimes the discussion will be so stimulating to the playwright or helpful that they'll want to bring in that scene again, a revision of that scene. And so I allow that. I've had the experience occasionally, rarely, where it seems like a playwright is just stuck and keeps rewriting the first scene over, and that's problematic. And I try to gently, once not so gently, and then I regret that moment, but generally gently encourage them to move forward with the play. And then when you're finished with maybe Act 1 or however long the play goes, you can go back and then look at it, but you need to move forward.
Well, yeah, 100%. I mean, I was in workshops that I've done in the past, or writing groups that I've been in the past. I actually stopped bringing in pages until I was done with the whole piece, because I would fall in that exact same place where I'd get stuck on those pages, and I was, reworking those rather than bringing anything new in. And I think it took, some time for me to finally okay, maybe I just stop. I need to take a different approach.
Well, it's interesting because some playwrights, so there are a couple of methods here. Playwrights that know where they're going with a play, have an end point, and are writing it week by week, and not, so they haven't written the play yet. Other playwrights will take the workshop saying, "Hey, Trey, I wrote this play a few years ago, didn't quite get the feedback I was looking for. Can I bring it into your workshop?" I'm like, "Sure." Again, we're just going to do 10 pages at a time, And just like with the others, but that would be a play that's already written. And then maybe they're revising it more because now hopefully they're hearing the feedback that maybe was missing from that first time for the first round of whatever submissions or however that the process was at that time for that playwright. And now they're getting feedback from the workshop that will help them really move forward with the play. And then at the end of the workshop, I should also mention that if I can, and we have time allowing, we'll do readings, either live readings or Zoom readings of the plays in their entirety. Or in a larger excerpt. As I mentioned, we do 10 pages a week, but by the end of 8 weeks, you have, maybe 50, 80 pages, something in that range, or a bunch of short plays. If you're writing 10-minute plays, which is fine too. And then I try to allow, put together an evening, bring in actors and maybe have, some cheese and wine, and we just, do sit-down readings of those plays, unrehearsed generally, just so playwrights can hear them out loud and have an audience of invited friends and guests and in a fun casual setting, sort of like a graduation party.
Sure. So how long does it run and how long is each session?
Each session is 3 hours approximately if I'm careful with time. If I'm not, maybe 3 hours and 10 minutes, or sometimes 2.5 hours. Again, as I mentioned, there are times when playwrights have to there will be an absence, and that's fine. I don't want playwrights to miss more than, say, 2 sessions out of the 8, but it's 8 sessions, usually consecutive Saturdays, maybe from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And so this workshop filled up, the current winter session filled up pretty quickly. We start this Saturday. And a lot of the playwrights, I'm pleased and proud of this, that they re-up. They want to continue in the workshop. So It makes me think, I feel like I'm doing something right.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always great. And I get to know them better. I get to know their voice. And I love that, what I love also about this group of writers, especially the ones that return, they're so incredibly generous and supportive with each other, and I think that's important. There have been times over the years, because I've been doing the workshop since about 2000, when I've had some difficult playwrights that one accused another of plagiarizing his work and stealing his ideas, and he was not. But he just got this in his mind, and he called me, wanted me to confront this other writer, and I declined to do so, and it was just got messy. I don't know. So part of the interview process is me determining whether somebody just seems like a good fit.
Sure.
And I also encourage and allow people to audit the workshop. Just sit in. Shut your Zoom camera off and just listen to us. And if you like it, then maybe there'll be. Whoops, sorry.
That happens all the time.
Okay, maybe leave a slot for you in the next session, or and then for the writers that audit that may feel that's not right for them, and that's fine too. I think it could be a scary process.
Sure.
To write, to bring in a few pages a week, especially if it's a play that it's not finished. You're in the middle of it. We're all vulnerable, I think, in that way as writers, revealing, presenting our work to our peers, and so I think it's a courageous act to just attend a workshop and to be able to do that, to show your work and to get that feedback. I think it's good for most writers, but I think it's not for everyone. That kind of weekly, a few pages at a time thing. But I think what's great about it is that you're really building the play, and you can work up those little bugs in the process, week by week. And so by the end of those 8 weeks, you have something hopefully really quite solid and ready for the next stage of development, whatever that might be.
With the playwrights that you have that sign up for this, would you find that are there inhibitions that you find that some of these playwrights come to the table with and that they break out of? Like they're just, because they might be new to the process, and so...
Well, yeah.
Are they open to the feedback? Do they...
I can tell you that, so I had one writer who would bring a tape recorder to the class when we were doing it live. And I'm not sure if she recorded any of the Zoom sessions, because you can do that. I think she would have to ask me permission as the administrator. But she had a little cassette recorder because she wanted to hear that. And she was really kind of, religious about trying to incorporate everyone's feedback to the point where I'm like, this is your play. You need to tell the story you want to tell, and just listen to the feedback that's that's most helpful to you. And if it's all helpful, that's great. But if you're getting like different kind of advice, because sometimes the writers during the discussion will disagree with each other, or maybe present contradicting,
100%.
feedback. And so what I try is to do is to kind of synthesize that if I can. I mean, that's, I think my role as a moderator is to find, what points of commonality we all have with our, feedback or thoughts or reactions to the play, so that the playwright is getting a consistent narrative regarding the feedback and will not leave the workshop confused or down, but feel that have a solid direction to go. Even if that direction is just rejecting all the feedback. These writers didn't really get what I was doing, didn't understand that, didn't appreciate it. That's fine too, if that's the case. And I over the years, I've really tried to hone and finesse my whole process, because I don't, as I mentioned, I don't want any writer to leave the workshop feeling bad, feeling down, feeling, unheard, in terms of the work, or depressed about, the way the discussion went. And there have been some times with some, like within the workshop and in readings, where I was wrong. I have to admit that I didn't get what the playwright was doing. And I led the discussion in a way that just was not helpful. And I may have even not listened to others well enough, or let the playwright participate in a way that allowed me to learn from what they were doing that I didn't get, that I didn't understand at the time. And so moments like that really stay with me, because I really wanted to write by all the playwrights as best I can. I mean, we're all there, for the same purpose, and I feel like the workshop is like a little micro community of writers there to support and help each other. And so far, like in my current last year or two and beyond that, that's been true. I think everybody's been mostly helpful. There have been some times when I could tell people, say, we're from different political alignments, and that created some awkwardness.
Sure. And
especially in how we, the conversations that happened maybe before or after the workshop, and in how the work was discussed. And so, I try to, sometimes you can't avoid that. I'm not babysitting,
Sure.
That may be too heavy a word, but I'm there to moderate, and I don't want to be a scold or cut off conversations, that could happen, unless I feel that someone is being harmed by the tenor of a certain feedback. And I had to cut off a few conversations, or challenge the respondent to say, let's finesse this. What is it you're, expressing here or not getting, or, let's find another way to word this in a way that is supportive and helpful to the playwright. If you're just coming out with a criticism, like that character would never talk that way. It's like, wait a minute, how would this character talk? What is about the dialogue that, is there something you find inauthentic, or is there, what would be in your mind, maybe a stronger way of the character expressing this in dialogue? What do you think is missing here? Can you express it in a way that the playwright will gain from that, and not, shut off the conversation because you're being a little bit nasty or negative, or, critical in a way that's unhelpful? Okay.
You mentioned process as far as your workshop goes, but do you have a process when it comes to your writing?
Yes. Well, here's like there's one, like an overall aspect is I'm not a hugely disciplined writer. So part of my process is and that just means like the writing. I feel like I'm a disciplined thinker and cogitator,
sure,
and reflector, whatever. I have to let an idea sit and germinate for a long time. So, cut to Trey is a little boy. My dad has told me that he observed when I was a little kid that if I didn't get something right immediately, I would give up in frustration. And so I think that's true. Knowing that that's kind of my default way of doing things, if I sit down, that's a fear I have. If I sit down with what I think is a great idea, and I start with the premise and start writing the dialogue, and then it just seems to, I get stuck or I have nowhere to go, I may just give up in despair. So, and I don't want to be that writer. But what I'm not is like one of these people that get up super early and spend an hour just writing. And I would like to do more of that in the future, that almost journal writing or writing for the sake of writing, just because you develop a facility for language and, dialogue, character, whatever you're doing, even if it's just like personal journal writing about your observations or experiences or whatever. Anyway, so back to process. I need to spend a lot of time thinking about it. So I have kind of an idea that's not just a premise or an image or something simple, but it's almost like the play has kind of formed in my head, and now I just need to sort of take the dictation. In a way. Now, again, that's a very general and broad way of describing a process, and it's not always that. But I feel like I need to have confidence because the fear will overwhelm if I don't feel I'm moving in a certain direction. So, like for example, I'm working on a play right now. I know that I want the protagonist pretty much to have a fourth wall, flexibility, so he can talk to the audience. There are 3 other characters. I needed to, kind of find them. His, a pastor, a wife, and an outlier, a kind of an outsider, who's on a laptop all the time, and who's maybe borderline homeless, who's just in a difficult situation with his life. And so I have this foursome, and so that helped me understand, where I think this might go and where it might have potential from a storytelling standpoint and from characters and their conflicts. And so now I'm in the process of writing this play. But it took me about a year to kind of think about this. Like I can tell you a little more about this play if though it's in its very early stages.
Sure.
Okay. This man in a food court approached me one day. I'd seen him for a time, like over several weeks. I thought he might be homeless or have mental illness. And he approached me. I thought he was going to panhandle. So I reached in my pocket to get some money for him. I'll give him a couple bucks, And he saw me doing that and said, "No, sir, I don't want your money. I just want compassion. Can you show me compassion?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure I can. Of course. Yeah. What? How do you mean? Yes, I can do that." So then he wanted us to exchange phone numbers. And then he wanted me to call him every morning to give him a positive word to start his day. And this sort of escalated into, this was in a workplace of mine. So I couldn't avoid seeing him. And he would approach me. He would never enter the workplace itself, but he was in this food court area. And it just became impossible to manage. The compassion he wanted, it was just boundless, it seemed like. It was insatiable or something. I mean, it just became so difficult. And I guess maybe I didn't really understand what that meant to him. To me, it meant like a mother. To him, it meant like a mother's love. Mm-hmm. And to me, it meant like, I can call him with a positive word every day. I buy him a sandwich. I'll buy him. I can't take him under my wing. I can't have him live with me. It just became really fuzzy what was happening with this. But this idea of compassion and its limits fascinated me. And so I mentioned this to some people who said, "You need to cut him off right away. Why the hell did you give him your phone number?" I'm like, "Because he just wanted a positive word in the morning. Call him." And these calls just went on. Anyway, so I'm telling you a little too much about this play right now.
No, it's fascinating. Fascinating story.
It was fascinating to me enough that I just sat on this for a long time and thought, what can I
How long ago was this?
This is a couple of years ago now. So again, it takes me a long time to kind of think about where this might go. And I'm still not quite sure. I'm embarrassed if I have friends listening to the podcast, they're like, "Trey, you've been talking about this play for so long." And I have been talking about it for a bit, and I'm writing it, but it's one of these things where it comes in fits and starts. And I also, okay, getting back to your other question about process, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I'll share it with your audience, that I sometimes feel the writing process is still somewhat sacred in a way. The art, the idea of creating something. And that has hindered me, because it's like, I admire these writers that get up so early in the morning with their cup of tea and they're just writing. And by 10 a.m. they have like 10 pages or more. And that's fantastic. I don't think I'm that guy. I'm the guy who's, looking for his glasses for an hour and trying to find a clean pair of underwear. It's like, I am not that writer, but I feel like when I set myself to writing, when I am inspired and then develop the discipline. Hammer it out. Sometimes I gotta force myself to write, and that also feels like, who cares? Right? You gotta force yourself. Man, don't write if you gotta force yourself. No, but it's. Oh,
you got it. No, you do have to force yourself.
But it's how the story comes, and how the inspiration comes, and so it has to feel inspired, and the writing time has to feel special. I don't roll out of bed and get my journal and start writing. I'm somebody who kind of needs this whole kind of ritual setup to then create. And it's, a little silly, maybe a little precious sounding, but that's just, what I think has helped me. That maybe these are crutches,
Take this for what it's worth. I think that there's that ethereal aspect of writing that, like, the play is there. It'll be ready when you're ready. Mm-hmm. So I don't think you can really put yourself. Point. Yeah, I don't think you can really put that much pressure on you. It's always going to be there when it'll be there when you're ready. I think, and then so the question that I have for you is, do you outline?
I do. Okay, so I have what I call the mess around document, and I'm sure there are other expressions for that. That's just what I call it for everything I'm writing. Whether it's like a spec script for a screenplay or TV or a play, and the mess around is just. All my ideas, just vomiting up the ideas. So out of that, an outline will emerge. When I look at the pieces that I kind of laid out, like sometimes it'll be an image. Oh, I want this character to do that. Oh, at some point the character needs to do this. Oh, these two need to have a conversation about this. This thing needs to happen. It's a mess. It's a jumble.
Sure.
But then out of that, I'll go, oh, before this happens, okay, now I see what Act 1 is. Or, oh, no, I don't need an act. It's just going to be all one continuous action. Or whatever, whatever the piece I'm working on is. And so from the mess around document comes the outline, which then becomes the play. And I will say that I tend to do that more with, if I'm working on a screenplay or like a TV outline, like spec scripts that I'm working on developing. There's always that mess around document, which is just kind of everything in a jumble. And then from that I kind of pick the things that suggest a kind of structure, or I know structure is not kind of a controversial word among many playwrights, as opposed to organization, or what's the other word? The way you organize or assemble, the order in which you assemble the events in your script. I don't know. There are many ways to describe structure, but so for me, structure will kind of emerge. How we start the play. Is there an opening image or opening dialogue or sentence, something that happens that then I feel like I can kind of hang the rest of the play on, and then we're off to the races. But so to answer your question, yeah, I do outline. That's kind of my middle process between mess around and first draft, because I like to know where I'm going. I think.
Sure, and sometimes for me, I don't. Sometimes I don't know. The ideas will pop in my head. I'll get inspired by something, and then I might write that scene. I don't write necessarily linearly. I know that there's, in my current piece, I know there's more scenes that I need to add in the beginning, but you get that flow going. It's like, this is where it's going now. And so, but I think some things happen too quickly. That's neither here nor there, though. You mentioned that you've kind of gone from full length down to like the shorter one act plays. Why, where do you find the difficulty is in those full lengths compared to those shorter pieces?
The full lengths, there's just so much more to do. And so, but I will say that the shorter pieces, there have been production opportunities, immediate opportunities for me. So often I'm writing, I've had the great privilege of being a part of every production of my plays, of being there with the director and the actors, and, from the table read to the production. And that's been really exciting. And I've been, it's been an honor to have that in my life. Except for I had a production of a short piece in Ohio at Mad Lab in Columbus, Ohio. That was just a submission to an event called Theater Roulette. But I feel like, so Edward Albee, I believe, is famously quoted when asked about the difference between his one-act short plays and full-length plays, said, all my plays are full-length plays. And so I tend to look at all my plays in that way, even if it's a shorter piece, because you do want the beginning, middle, and end. So it kind of is sort of prep work for writing the longer pieces. But I will say that generally my short pieces have had production opportunities that I'm writing for. At Moving Arts for many years, it was the car plays that we did that was conceived by our former artistic director, Paul Stein. And so those, your audience, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the car plays. These are plays produced inside of parked cars. So it's immersive outdoor theater. We get a row of like 5 cars, maybe 4 rows of 5 cars. You, as an audience member, you buy a ticket to one row, and then you get to see like 5 plays, which is about an hour. The program is about an hour. The plays have to be timed meticulously because you have to get audience members in and out of the cars. And sometimes you'll have a play that will be. I performed in a play written by Paul Stein called Disneyland, in which I was the dad, yelling at my kids in the back seat on a trip to Disneyland. So we parked, and now I'm chewing them out for misbehaving. Sometimes you'll have plays where an audience member is in the front seat and another is in the back seat, they're catty corner, or maybe both in the front seat, and all the action happens in the back seat. But regardless, then we have the ushers are called car hops, and they take audience members out of the cars. So the economics of this are 2 audience members per car, so that's 10 per row, 10, 20, that's 40 per program.
Sure.
So we're doing like 20 plays. And what was so great about this, also, just the novelty of the concept was fantastic, and the plays were a lot of fun. They were all terrific. We got to invite theater artists from like all over town to be part of this. And so I got to meet a lot of people from, I'm a member of Moving Arts. This is a Moving Arts project, but from Sacred Fools, Theater of Note, Circle X, and other independent theater artists that, were actors and directors whose work I had admired and seen on stages around town. So it was a thrill. But so being part of Moving Arts and a playwright and actor, I got to perform in car plays and write for the car plays and directed a few car plays as well. So it was just really a fantastic experience. It's a recurring event. I'm not sure what plans are in the future for the car plays, but we've done it, successfully over several years. And then another project I wrote, it was a shorter piece, an adaptation of an H.P. Lovecraft short story called From Beyond. And this is also immersive theater. I don't know if you're familiar with Wicked Lit. For a number of years, Unbound Productions is the company, but Wicked Lit was their big annual event. It would be like plays that were adapted from classic horror literature in the public domain, performed at this mausoleum and cemetery in Altadena Mountain.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was a fan of Wicked Lit, for many years, and I knew one of the producers, Jonathan Josephson, was an intern at Moving Arts a number of years before, literary intern. So I'd gotten to know him and got to see him rise, as a theater artist and playwright and producer, and he was part of this triumvirate at Wicked Lit, also Paul Millay and Jeff Rack, and they produced Wicked Lit. And so I submitted a play to them, and I was honored to have it produced as a reading, and then in one of their full productions in 2016. But most of my most recent work has been immersive theater, the car plays inside of the cars. Sure. And then, From Beyond was this H.P. Lovecraft play at the mausoleum, where actors are traveling to different, parts of the mausoleum or the cemetery. And it was just really great. And so, and again, I got to be there for the premiere and for the rehearsals, and got to watch the plays and see audiences react, and that's always a thrill, I think, as a playwright to be part of that process.
So we got to the point. You already let us know what you're working on now, which I'm very intrigued by, and I hope that you dust it off and break it out.
Yeah.
On that note, though, where can people find your work?
Before we met, we were setting this up. I was doing a little work on my website, so they can find me at treynichols.net. The workshop, the website is under revision right now. I'm trying to migrate to a different platform that's a little more mobile friendly and a little more cool. This is. Anyway, so treynichols.net. I won't go into it because it would take another hour to describe my issues with
technology,
with developing and revising my website. And it's an old website. It's an old software program, formerly Yahoo Small Business. Now it's Turbify. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you any further.
so that's where I would suggest people go, because there are links to some of my other projects. Like in 2020 and 2021, during the pandemic, Moving Arts produced an event, a Zoom series, a 9-episode series called Isolation In. So I initiated that and co-produced that with Dana Schwartz and Darren Anthony. He was the artistic director. She was a co-executive producer. And we were sort of the heads of that, along with our tech director, Gabrielle Griego. And it was fantastic. We invited, all members of our company to be part of it if they wanted to be part of that. And many did. So we had a team of writers and actors and brought in some people from outside. And so this is, so the link to that, Isolation In is the name. That's link is on my website, though you could go to YouTube and find it as well, Isolation In. And there are other links to some of my plays. I don't know if you can, I don't think I have any of my scripts loaded to my website yet. And that's something pending, as is my registration with NPX, the New Play Exchange. So I'm going to be doing that soon. So
we'll hold you to that.
Keep an eye out. Thank you. Yes.
Trey, thanks for coming on to the Playwright Spotlight.
Thank you for having me. I wish you all the best, and I hope I acquitted myself well. I think
absolutely.
This was a lot of fun, and I wish you and your listeners a very happy New Year.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this video with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a 5-star review. And in the meantime, and until we see each other again, keep writing.